December 20. Good morning, everybody. This is the December 2025 SerVermont Commission meeting, and we are being recorded and transcribed. With that, Megan, if you want to call us to order, you can.
All right. I will call the meeting to order.
Wonderful. Let's do some welcomes and introductions. So thank you all for being here today. This is our final meeting of what has been a very exciting year, and the excitement will certainly continue. So I appreciate you bearing with us and your support throughout the year. We do have a new member here, Stephen. We're very excited to have on the commission. So I think it would benefit everybody if we went around, did introductions, who you are, perhaps how long you've been involved with the commission, and then what role or roles you fill on the commission. And don't forget to make sure I go around this room as well. Let's start. I'll just pick on people. I'm seeing Chris on my screen.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Chris Shembry. I've been on the commission, I think, since 2020. I want to say could be 2021. It's been like 4 or 5 years. It's been a little bit, for sure. And yeah, it's been great. I'm just a commission member. I don't have any sort of like a executive committee like title or anything like that. And I found my way here because I did 2 terms of AmeriCorps back between, I think, 2016 and 2018. That's how I ended up in Vermont. And then back during the pandemic, Phil reached out and was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, sure, why not? So I do work in the Agency of Human Services here in the state of Vermont. I work for DALE, which is the Department for Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living. Specifically, I'm at Higher Ability, which used to be Folk Rehab back in the day.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to pick on Jade next.
Good morning. I'm Jade Christy Maples. I live in Berlin, Vermont. I came to the commission via my dear friend Megan. There's another cube on the screen here. I have a background in healthcare and healthcare policy. I've worked nationally as a consultant for about 15 years and have just hung my own shingle to do that in a new way. Here in Vermont, but basically filling that sort of healthcare point of view where I can. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Jade. Megan, you're next.
All right. Hi, I'm Megan McKeever. I'm the vice chair. I can't even remember when I came on the commission. I think it was like 2018 or something along those lines. I live in Montpelier and I work at Washington County Mental Health. So I come from the children's mental health perspective.
Thanks, Megan. Patrick?
Good morning, all. Patrick Halliday. I am the Director of Educator Licensure at the University of Vermont. Before that, I was, and I've been, before that, I was at the state, which is how I first got involved with the SerVermont Commission. In my role there, I was representing kind of the education state perspective. However, my ties to AmeriCorps go much deeper than that. I can go back probably sadly longer than anyone here into the mid-90s. And that's how I met my wife. My daughter did AmeriCorps. My son worked for the organization that was the host organization for AmeriCorps. So we are, yeah, we're through and through.
Amazing. Thank you, Patrick. Dan, I'm going to pick on you. We're just doing introductions for the benefit of everybody, but specifically Stephen, our new member. Who you are, what you represent.
All right. Good morning. I'm Dan Noyes. I serve in the Vermont legislature on the Human Services Committee and work a lot with older Vermonters. And I'm in Chicago, as you can see, kind of behind me at a conference. So glad to be here.
Thanks for making the time to join while you're at a conference. And Kaylee, morning.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Kaylee. I respond to anything. My name is a little bit funky. I served as a member almost 10 years ago now, which is crazy. I've been on the commission for a few years and I live in Hardwick, and welcome, Stephen.
Excellent. And let's go around this room. Maybe we'll start down there and we'll just go this way.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. I don't appear to be appearing on camera. Caitlin here. I'm just gonna go over. Okay, there you. Hey, Caitlin, I'm our Vista Program Director at SerVermont, and I've been here for about, gosh, a little over 2 years at this point. Welcome, Stephen, and good to see you all.
Hi, I'm McKenna Crosby. I'm SerVermont's program officer, and I've been here for about a year and a half.
Hi, I'm Danielle Schein, SerVermont's training officer. I'm an AmeriCorps and Peace Corps alum and previously worked as program staff for a couple of programs that were operating in Vermont, including the program Stephen served in. And I've been in my role at the commission for just over a year and a half, same as McKenna.
Hi, everybody. You all know me, Phil Coling, Executive Director of SerVermont. In 2026, I will hit my 15th year with this organization. I've been here since 2011, which feels wild. And glad to have you all here. Welcome, Steve.
Hello, my name is Jay. I've been the Communications and Recruitment Coordinator for SerVermont just under a year and a half. Shortly after McKenna and Danielle got started. And I too have been an AmeriCorps alum. I served in the EGO program for 2 years.
Thanks, everybody. For those who joined a minute late, we gave the fair warning. You're being recorded and transcribed. These meetings the recording gets posted to our website as well as the transcription. And Stephen. Thank you, Danielle. Stephen, I skipped you because we were talking about you.
No worries. Yeah, I'll give a little introduction to myself. So just, thanks for having me here. I found out or got kind of a part of this commission with Phil reaching out to our team. I'm Stephen Maliwenda, so I'm a grants and finance manager with United Way of Northwest Vermont. Been here for like a little over 3 years now, but my ties actually to Vermont come from AmeriCorps, and as Danielle said, I moved to Vermont for an AmeriCorps position. I did 2 terms of AmeriCorps as well, so that's a little kind of past history there. And it's really exciting to kind of be come back to this realm. I mean, not to say that we're not too far attached from AmeriCorps at United Way. We do have 3 Vista members currently here within our organization. And then we also have a senior corps program, which is RSVP. We run a Bone Builders program. If some of you may have heard of that before, that's run through our program manager, Danielle, as well. And they run an amazing program with that too. So, but I'm very excited to be here, very excited to be connected with SerVermont and, AmeriCorps, and getting to be more behind the scenes and hear more what's going on. So, and it's so exciting to see some familiar faces. So good to see you all and some new faces. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Stephen. Sorry again that I skipped you. Thank you, Danielle, for pointing that out. And as you all know, you all filled specific slots on the commission, but folks can also fill more than one slot. And so Stephen, part of the slot is technically replacing the piece that we lost when Dan changed jobs and was no longer at a senior corps host organization. So Dan, we still value everything you represent on the commission, but you don't fill that part of that seat anymore. And so Stephen has that part of that seat. And then as you all hear, alum, finance background, all that good stuff. So Stephen, we couldn't be more excited to have you and appreciate your service. Welcome. Okay, now we can move on. The minutes from June were sent out ahead of time and posted to our website since then. Megan, you could entertain what we do with those. Oh, Megan, I think you're muted.
Yep, I am. I'm having a Teams issue, so I can't see anybody anymore. So I might jump off and then jump back on.
Okay.
But are there any corrections or comments related to the minutes? Okay. Is anyone raising their hand? Because I just can't see anybody.
I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Fabulous.
I move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Second? Thanks, Jade. All right.
Patrick and Jade,
Minutes approved.
you need to call the question.
Are the minutes approved?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, there we go. Perfect. Now they're approved.
All right,
Now
I'll be
enter
right
the
back.
Got it. We now enter the public comment period. We don't have any members of the public here with us today. Any of you have any public comments? Hearing none, we'll move it on. So presenting some numbers we need to know about. Some of this is a little bit of a refresher, and some of this is just stuff we talk about constantly. So we always talk about enrollment and retention within our AmeriCorps programs. This is a practice that goes back to a point in time where a really long time ago, commissioners wanted sort of an ongoing update in terms of how programs were performing. So right now, out of the 2 programs we're running, Vermont State University has 3 members serving, and Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has 1 member serving. That's not what we would typically see at this point in the year, but it does align with their new plans to really, sorry here, I have to scroll over past screens to let Megan in. Is Megan in? Someone let her in. Okay, perfect. Thank you. But it fits with their plans to really start a January cohort. That's partially because of the impact the grant terminations back in April had on all these programs and how they operated. Our programs are great at finding a silver lining. So one of the silver linings of a January start is that our focus on disaster and training members for disasters, which as we know, tend to happen in the spring and summer around these parts. Folks who start in January could actually get trained up, be available to respond when the disaster hits, and then they're not ending service in August or September. Right after the disaster, they're actually around and able to serve through that. So that is a silver lining there. Don't read any worry into these low numbers. It really is just the new reality of how they're going to have to operate. We're hearing good stuff about recruitment efforts so far. So folks are applying for their positions. And it's mid-January. So actually right before our next commission meeting, we're actually will be participating with Vermont Housing and Conservation Board on their member orientation. So things are moving forward and looking good for all of our programs. Any questions about that? Wonderful. Just hitting quickly on our overall commission 2025 funding. This is fiscal year 2025 funding. So at this point, when we last met back in June, it wasn't exactly clear what ECO was going to do with their grant award. We have not found an organization that has the capacity right now to operate the ECO program. So even though they were offered a $600,000 award, they have chosen to cease operations and are not running this year. So at this point, we will likely end up relinquishing that award unless we find another fiscal host pretty quickly. The potential silver lining there is there's a lot of interest from former host sites and other organizations to keep something like that program going long term. We're also at a point where for an organization to take that grant on as the fiscal host right now in the final year of a competitive cycle, especially in the context of not having the notice of funding for the next round, that's a huge ask of any organization. So we are okay with that decision and kind of where that stands. It's not ideal, but not much of what has occurred in the last years has been ideal. So any questions about these numbers? All right, moving right into our updates and discussions. I am going to semi-hand it over to Danielle for a few comments about our service to career pathways work. But before I do that, I just want to thank Danielle for ensuring that that work continued even through all the chaos. We had committed to doing some service to career pathway work with the National Governors Association, as well as the Department of Labor before our grants were terminated. And it was really kind of questionable if we were going to be able to continue that work for a while, but I handed virtually all of it off to Danielle, and we actually had some pretty successful outcomes from that work. So with that, Danielle, thank you, and share what you want.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. So the photo on the screen right now is a picture from our Service to Career Pathways Summit held back in September. It was great to have a couple of commissioners there in their roles outside of the commission. I think we had about 70 people attend, and one of the things that I heard Phil say, and our partner in Department of Labor and Workforce Development, that it was great to be in a room where we didn't know everybody. So I think one of the biggest successes is that we were able to engage a lot of new partners in this work. So exposing more people to AmeriCorps and to those opportunities around service to career pathways and AmeriCorps as a potential workforce development strategy. Our work with the National Governors Association has technically ended. The grant ended in November, but the people who kind of made up the Vermont Policy Academy team have committed to continue meeting. And I think that we've built some really productive relationships with the Department of Labor, some philanthropic partners, and people in industry. So I think we'll be able to, I think, produce some new opportunities and pathways, hopefully in the near future.
Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah.
And for those of you who weren't there, I think there were no giant, areas we haven't talked about before, like blind spots, but it was great to have all those partners together, sort of reiterating some of these concepts that we've been talking about for years. And, folks who were learning about our work and saying, oh, that exists, and learning more about the Education Award, asking questions about how we pair that with other opportunities. So it was a big success. Any questions about that? Throw my bag wherever you want.
Effort to be on camera.
Yeah. With that, we're going to jump over to Vista for a second for a Vista update. And this is another one where I want to give some kudos out before I turn it over, because you all know the last year has been hard, but a giant bright spot in all of it is certainly the Vista program. Speaking only for myself, but I think that others on our team have experienced it during some of the most trying moments. Connecting with Vista members who are doing some amazing things has really been a breath of fresh air and reminded me of why we do what we do. And none of that would have happened without Caitlin continuing to attempt to run a program that suddenly we weren't sure was even going to happen. And it's happening. And so it's a good time to share with you all what some of that is. And for me to share my appreciation for all of Caitlin's hard work to keep that program running. So Caitlin.
Thanks, Phil, and thank you on the last topic to Danielle. I was present at the Service Career Pathways that summit, and that was a great day. It was good to see some faces there as well. So thanks for that. And yeah, Vista, I love this collage. This is great. So yeah, some of you may recall we had it was a tricky start to the program here this past summer. But we were able to enroll 8 members, 2 of which actually started last March, and they are both serving through March in a disaster services capacity, both in Central Vermont. Actually, one is considering an extension, so first piece of good news there. And then 6 folks joined in August with our typical cohort model, so they'll be serving from August to August. And 3 of which, as Stephen mentioned, are housed within United Way of Northwest Vermont, Common Good up there. And yeah, so we actually, Danielle and I got out into the field and had a site visit Tuesday to visit the members, just to see how they're doing, have some check-ins, group check-ins, individual, and folks doing great. So we have folks, we are in pretty diverse pockets of the state. We're, of course, in South Burlington by way of the United Way and Common Good. However, those positions, of course, impact, that's Chittenden County, Franklin County, Nonprofit Association for the whole state. Then we have a couple folks down in Bennington. We see Andrew here at the Bennington Community Market, down in that picture, folks at the medical center down there. We have a member at a public library this year in Loyal County. So we're scattered around, and folks are really engaged this year. We have monthly-ish trainings here in Waterbury typically. Folks are very engaged. There's some pictures here from those trainings. And in addition to the members being engaged, this team really is engaged as well too. So I really appreciate and gratitude for everyone here in this room for showing up to these trainings, supporting folks. It's really helpful, I think, for members to not just see me, but to know that there's a whole team supporting them, especially through what was a bit of a tumultuous year. But these are resilient members. They've all stuck it out this past year, and we're looking ahead to 2026 with hope and optimism. And I guess on that note as well, we received our earlier than anticipated. Really lovely. We received our anticipated slots for this coming year. So our, I guess, FY26, the 26-27 program. I'll be sending out requests for information to potential, new and returning host sites in January. So I guess an ask for you all, if there's an organization or organizations in your region and your, umbrella that you think would benefit from a Vista, please let me know. Love to send the RFI their way. But we received our slots where they're giving some Vista leader this coming year, which really gonna make that happen. And then 21 Vista member positions. Last year they gave us 20. We weren't able to fill those for various reasons. But we're gonna try to fill those 21 positions plus a leader. And those folks would begin in August. So lots to look forward to, I guess, side of things. So happy to answer any questions if there are. Or if you're curious what a member in your region might be doing, let me know. If you ever want to go out on a site visit with me, come along.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, Caitlin. I wanted to call out one more thing about Vista, just for clarity. During the government shutdown, one of the primary impacts in our work, because most things are already forward funded, and so they're reimbursement grants, so the shutdown doesn't impact them. Traditional Vistas do not get paid. And so it was a pretty wild time to consider that we were not providing, or the federal government was not providing pay to the Vistas as they should be. And so to mitigate that, Caitlin worked really closely with all of the host sites in most cases, the host sites could actually front the living allowance payment to the members, so they would be okay. 2 of our 8 members still live in the dorm that we have had up until this point. So at least in terms of housing, they were taken care of. And then we came up with a mechanism, kind of an emergency relief mechanism, where we could grant a short-term emergency grant through our own state funds to the organizations to pass along to the Vista to fill that gap. So it was wonderful that we didn't actually lose any members during that period of time. If you can imagine, you're expecting a mere $1,000 check for your biweekly pay period, your living allowance, and you don't get that. That could be a huge problem. It could disenfranchise folks, especially with how long that all dragged on. So getting through that with all of our members intact was a small miracle, and also showed us how we can handle this in the future if we end up in that situation again. It is not the first time we have had a shutdown, but it is the longest. So kudos to Caitlin also for helping us work through that.
And if I may add, I believe if not all 8, 7 of the 8 members relocated to Vermont to serve. So that was a real concern. Folks who didn't have ties already in the state, what's keeping them? They're not getting their living allowance for a month. And so, I mean, shout out to Bill, our business office, every AHS leadership to help make sure there was should a government shutdown happen again, we now have these steps in place to help mitigate the financial disaster on their end, I guess. So thanks.
Which actually just reminded me of another great Vista success that was notable this year, which was that during orientation, totally organically, the AHS secretary, Jenny Samuelson, swung by and met the members and talked to them about what they were doing. And for a long time, like the whole time, we invite people into orientation, and we had never had the opportunity to actually host the secretary, and it was wonderful for the secretary to have an opportunity to hear from members what they're doing, where in the state, and the secretary noted that they're all over the place and they're working on critical issues for Vermonters, and they represent kind of the best of our work. So I think having people serving in a capacity where they're actually providing benefits to people in the community gave everybody around here a huge kind of a shot in the arm just to keep going and keep working hard, because we are providing valuable services. So thanks for that update, Caitlin. Any questions for Caitlin or about Vista generally? Hearing none, I'm going to find my cursor and we can move on. So member housing, we wanted to hit on this. We talked about it every meeting since we became engaged with Greenway and the Glover Hadley Hall up at the former Vermont College of Fine Arts campus in Montpelier. Here's a picture of our fabulous residents. And at this point, given what happened to all of our programs, when they're starting, etc., we have given up our giving up our sub-grant. So the way we had secured that housing was through sub-grant to Greenway for providing that housing. And while that's a little bit disappointing in one way, because I think had our program stayed steady, had we not lost ECO, I think we certainly could have filled the rooms that we had this year, but that's not the reality we were facing. So while that sub-grant is coming to an end, we're now partnering in more of an ad hoc way where members who need housing or want housing in Montpelier can pay for that directly, or their host site could potentially pay for that directly, or if we end up back in a position where we could pay for a whole dorm, perhaps we could do that. So right now we're down to 2 Vistas living there. This is another one. I have to give Caitlin a shout out because she was our, well, there was no real title, but housing coordinator who made sure that people had the rooms that they requested. And so we're declaring that it was a massive success. and a huge victory. And certainly in terms of a pilot and validating the concept of if you have housing, more people can serve. That housing was so critical when it came to ensuring that during the shutdown, the Vista members were taken care of, right? Because the things you worry about are them paying their bills, paying rent on time. Historically, landlords who are renting to AmeriCorps members are very gracious when there are weird things that are the fault of the federal government and Congress and not the member themselves. But knowing, they have a place to stay, they're safe. Greenway has been a great partner in terms of making sure everything's taken care of in the sort of landlord sense. And it made sense too. We did kind of a debrief with the members after they had been there for a while, and they loved being there across programs. So with folks other than the folks serving in their own AmeriCorps program, I think we had 4 different programs represented at one point, or 5 really, including the Vistas. Yeah. Really all of them for the most part. So very, that was the highlight of this year for sure, to sort of vet that concept and know that it's possible. Vermont State University is still offering their members housing on campuses, but in terms of our little experiment, it certainly worked. Any questions about that?
And I can add, in terms of getting people to Vermont to serve and then keeping them here, I know that in addition to the 2 Vistas who are still living there through the end of their service, 2 or maybe 3 folks then extended on and signed a lease with Greenway to stay in the dorm while they are figuring out their life after AmeriCorps. So I know a few folks who are still in there, not affiliated with us any longer, but it got them in the door and they're still here and exploring options in the region.
Thanks, Caitlin.
This
Any
isn't
questions?
not a question, Phil, but just a comment. I'm glad to hear we're sort of allowing flexibility in the relationship. It seems like Greenway is a great partner, and there may be opportunities in the future to revisit the sub-grant piece, but if they're continuing to be that resource for members in a different way, I think that will certainly be important for recruitment moving forward. So, just comment.
Absolutely. And we are thinking of it that way in terms of, as the 2 programs recruit folks, if they hear someone's having trouble finding housing in time for the start of the program year, we're going to connect them and say, hey, this is at least a place to land, right? It's not convenient to everywhere, but it's certainly more convenient than wherever you would be relocating from, presumably. So, yeah. Thanks, Jade. Any other questions or comments about that? All right. We're jumping right into it now. So in terms of the AmeriCorps competition, which normally by now we would have been at an AmeriCorps member start of service conference in early December and had a board meeting there and decided what was going to be submitted to the competition. This year has obviously been quite different. AmeriCorps has not released a notice of funding yet, and we have received information from them indicating that they may not release a notice of funding until appropriations have been made by Congress, which is very different than anything that has happened previously. So typically we get a NOFO in August. We actually get it when it's embargoed so that we can start our process of creating a request for proposals. That gets released in August or September, folks apply, and then at some point we end up with a budget, but the whole competition essentially can happen without that. AmeriCorps, as I said, indicated they don't believe we can do anything until there are appropriations. You all are aware that we released a request for proposals, and last week AmeriCorps made it clear to all state service commissions that if we had done so, we needed to take it off our websites, stop advertising it, and if we did not, there could be consequences. So that is everything that I'm going to say about that in a public meeting format. If folks wanted to discuss that further, we could go into executive session to discuss that. And the reason for doing that would be that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the commission at a substantial disadvantage. Typically, we don't talk about anything not in the public part of the meeting, but that would be the reasoning for doing so. So ending that piece of where we are, I will say that right now we're at a pause. So on the advice of council, we have paused our grant making activities, and the path forward is very possible. So there are some states that have long procurement processes and minimum release lengths and application windows for competitions. In our case, we can release a request for proposals the second we get a notice of funding, or as soon thereafter as we can, and we can have the process designed to be as short as it needs to be. So really, if we got a notice of funding today, we could re-release a request for proposals and make sure that we could created a timeline that could meet all of the necessary deadlines. So that's not a worry of ours. That part has been cleared, and that's likely what we will end up doing. We are aware of some other federal grant processes that have been very quick. There's been a couple that had really interesting, windows. One had a notice released the Friday before the week of Thanksgiving, and then it was like the following Wednesday, I believe, that it was due. So it was basically the week of Thanksgiving and a couple days on either end. We could see something like that where we get the notice right before the winter holidays, and we're anticipating that the due date back to AmeriCorps will be similar to what it usually is. So we're talking like January 20th through 24th. That could be a really quick turnaround for some folks. I wouldn't anticipate that we would have any brand new applicants, but we would certainly have an open and public process that allowed anybody to participate that wanted to, and we would do the absolute best that we could. So I'm thinking that the meeting in January will be important. Hopefully by then we will have a NOFO. I'll be able to describe what the process looks like, and then perhaps even the commission could move applications forward at that point, assuming we have a NOFO. Historically, we've always been able to handle the applications in our normal schedule of meetings. We always can have a special meeting, so that's a shorter, a meeting held with a shorter warning, or in the event something happens too quickly, we could have an emergency meeting too. But I'm really hoping that January 15th meeting will be timed in a way that we can leverage to getting what we need to get done. Dan, I'm seeing your hand.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. So what you're saying is we can't advertise these grants through a NOFO until they pass a budget, not a CR, but some sort of a budget. Am I hearing that correctly?
I'm going to say that you are hearing that correctly, because that was in one communication that we received, was that we shouldn't be advertising until the NOFO is released, and the NOFO may not be released until there is a budget. If there was a full year continuing resolution at the federal level, we're talking, I believe we could see a notice of funding. That might be enough. The second we see a notice of funding, whatever reasoning they have for releasing it when they do, it's clear we can then move forward. But this is the first time that we have heard anything from AmeriCorps as far as when we can release our information. We have never been able to release their information, the NOFO until the embargo is over. But historically, if a state wanted to run a competition of their own, not promising any federal funding or anything like that, we were able. But they did tell us that we could not.
Thank you.
And again, I'm happy to go into the weeds with anybody that's interested offline, or if folks really want to dig into the weeds, we would have to do so in executive session. But that's going to be our plan. It's just when they release the NOFO, we will then engage in an RFP process. So no decisions can be made. My recommendations as far as your actions are pause the process, which we have, release the RFP after the NOFO is released. We're going to communicate this clearly with interested parties. So it's fair to say that applicants to our state level RFP process are expecting communication with us soon. And so my plan is to communicate with them that we're paused. And then when we are able to unpause or restart, depending on what we hear from AmeriCorps, we'll ensure that the process is a fair process that results in the best applicants being selected for submission, and we'll adjust the timelines accordingly. Dan.
Yeah, sorry, just one more quick question. So the delay between if the NOFO is not released and funding ends, then programs basically stop operating until there's a budget and a NOFO is released. And then I have
So the programs that are currently operating, the two programs, they have funding secured through August. This is all tied to the application process that we're normally in the middle of that funds new programs beginning in August. So there's a little bit of time. One of our worries is that timeline. So AmeriCorps has made it pretty clear that they need the lead time that they usually do. So usually grants go to them at the end of January, and then it takes all the way until May or June for that competition to play out. They don't want to delay that. So they did say the timeline will likely be tight, and that could mean that some states are going to have trouble participating. You know, it might not be possible for some states. Hearing from our folks that we can have as short of a process as we need to have gave me some encouragement, but I think it's going to be really quick. So, you know, the NOFO's deadline, the application deadline will be the application deadline whenever that NOFO is released. We just have to be ready to be agile. And, you know, it's also possible that, you know, again, maybe the commission needs to have an emergency meeting. Maybe staff need to take emergency action to make sure that applications are submitted, right? Because at that point, we haven't done anything. We're not even saying we're going to run those programs. We would be just pushing the applications in so we don't miss that deadline. And then when we do have a meeting, we would have to ratify that action.
Hey, I just have one more question. Have we heard anything on senior corps programs, or is this just with AmeriCorps?
I am talking specifically about AmeriCorps, and actually I just saw Stephen's hand go up, and Stephen, if you know more about this, chime in. I heard that they received a NOFO for RSVP continuations only, not for the new and recompetes.
Yeah, that's our update so far on RSVP is that we, for, I think the continuations are maybe our assumption is like they're just running down those grants is our assumption. But since our RSVP grant, which ends March 31st of 2026, there has been nothing as far as any notice of funding opportunities yet released, and it still seems up in the air at this time on that side. So,
And on a call the other day with AmeriCorps, the question was asked, given what happened with RSVP and the continuation only notice, might that happen with AmeriCorps state and national? And the answer was no. There will be one NOFO for AmeriCorps state and national. So it's all questions right now. We know very little. And, again, I think at this point that happened. Did I say a call last week? That was this week. Time is interesting right now. So I think that call was Tuesday, right? Yeah. So Tuesday, we learned that Tuesday. Wednesday, I met with folks in our business office to sort of troubleshoot what would that look like or what could that look like. Of course, yesterday was Thursday, as we all know. Today we're meeting, and then my plan was after this meeting to share what we know with our folks who had engaged in the state level RFP process so far.
Could I ask a question?
Absolutely. Anybody can ask any question.
I was so just like for I guess more clarification too, is once the I guess AmeriCorps themselves released the NOFO, there's like a possibility that just in regards to your email yesterday, Phil, it said like determined if we should issue a new RFP. Is that meaning like reissuing a new RFP to those who've already submitted an RFP when it was available to those organizations to submit one?
Yeah, I understand the question, and it gets slightly complicated very quickly, but essentially, because we haven't seen a NOFO, and because nobody else has either, we should not be determining that any particular organization is or is not interested in applying for funding under that NOFO. And so the best option is to re-offer a different RFP that's responsive to the NOFO that is released. And, yes, re-release that to folks we are reasonably certain will want to apply because they've engaged with the previous RFP process, but also put it out in a way that any organization could still apply. So we're not eliminating people prematurely simply because, without a NOFO, it's impossible to know they don't want funding or they do want funding.
Okay. And this is for like specifically for like organizations are applying for AmeriCorps Vista position?
This is specifically for AmeriCorps State and National.
Oh, gotcha.
The Vista piece is so while our process is always a state request for proposals process with AmeriCorps State and National, it's tied to that federal process. There isn't the same federal process on the Vista side. So essentially, once we have the notice that we now do have, we got that last week, that says, hey, do we have up to 22 slots for you for Vista. Do you want them? We say yes. And then we engage in a request for proposals process for those slots. But that's all at the state level. And they don't make decisions about that level of funding. That decision is already made through their Vista allocation process. So it's they're distinct processes that come about in different ways. And so we handle them different ways.
Okay, thank you.
It is hard to track, and it's definitely something that if you want to follow up on, I'm happy to, because I know how that RSVP part works, and that's even different than the AmeriCorps State and National, which is different than the Vista. They're all distinctly different processes, which is very interesting and complicated. Patrick, I see your hand.
Yeah, mine's a little bit, it's not so much on the funding, so I can come back to the question. I don't want to sidetrack this if there are other things that are going on right now.
This is most of it. This is what's holding up all of our work right now, so go for it.
Okay, I'm just curious a little bit about what the decision for ECO to kind of shut up shop and what that means for the work that's been done or the work that's in progress and what that means down the line. I mean, it was this was our program that you couldn't even get into unless, that they had, if you go back a few years ago, there's so many applicants, but what's your take on that going forward?
Yeah. It is a unique situation. So as a refresher, they were competitively funded and they would have currently been in their third year of a 3-year competitive cycle. When the grants were terminated, and so essentially what that meant is no more federal funding for that program, they pivoted pretty quickly to being very supportive of their individual members and created a great plan to bring them all on as temporary employees. The exposure they got from that, the Department of Environmental Conservation, essentially, if you can't pay for all of that with federal dollars, that's, $500,000, $600,000
Right.
that needs to come from another source. They essentially they don't want to tolerate that risk.
Got it.
And so
that makes sense.
since that happened, they said, in terms of all the things we do, all the federal money we get, this is now too risky for us to engage with, and so we're going to end the program. I think, from their perspective, from the financial exposure perspective, it made sense. From our perspective, and from everything that was happening in terms of getting the grants reinstated and, making sure that money was there for the new program year we're now in an ideal world, I would have loved to have seen that program operate its final year of competitive funding and then put a bow on it, chosen not to compete this year, kind of like resourced it, but they decided to just move on at that point. And so we can move grants from one fiscal agent to another if we need to. And I think that number, the $600,000, and the idea of not spending $600,000 inspired lots of organizations to want to take on the grant. And further conversation with those organizations, and as they understood more what being a fiscal host looks like, they all determined they don't have the capacity to do that. One thing that highlighted, because it was, host sites. So organizations that had ECO AmeriCorps members at them were saying, these folks are so great. We don't want this to end. We want more of these people. Why wouldn't we just do this? We'll hold the grant. And when you explain everything that goes into managing a program, it's and so it actually highlighted that intermediary programs are a great way to get resources out into the community so that small nonprofits can have a wonderful AmeriCorps experience, can have the capacity of an AmeriCorps member pushing their initiatives forward. It was really highlighted that was a wonderful experience for host sites that were part of the ECO program. When you bring them into the weeds and say, okay, here's what happens, here's how it's monitored, here's how you're reimbursed. It's a lot of exposure. It is a lot of exposure. And when we got really into the weeds and we started saying, audits are interesting, your board needs to be ready to see a lot of question costs potentially. At the end of the day, we end up coming out pretty clean. Maybe there's a couple very small disallowances, but that initial findings can be big. No one wanted to take that on. At the same time, and when you talk about the future, all these host sites do want to see a program like that exist. When we start talking service to career pathways, one of the areas that folks want to keep investing in folks professionally is in that whole climate resilient jobs space, which of course AmeriCorps funding won't support, but the idea of creating climate ready professionals is still out there. And so I think there's some kind of future. It's really unfortunate to lose that structure. The folks who had run that program, Dustin and Carrie, did the best they could documenting everything so that, maybe we can just dust it off and reopen that program someday if we find the right place for it to be. And then full disclosure to the folks considering taking that grant on also included, we don't even have a top line number for AmeriCorps State and National right now. And thinking that we would pick up a new competitive grant is not, I don't know that we're in a position for much growth right now. The outlook isn't that they would be funded in the future. And so then keeping that program and the other intermediary programs going, we just might not have enough money. So I think that was another consideration for some of those folks. Danielle would like to add, yes,
Sure.
please.
I just wanted to add appreciation for the VHCB program. I think there have been some really motivated and interested former eco host sites that have transitioned to that program. So some of those organizations will still host AmeriCorps members just through VHCB. And I think that even includes some returning eco members moving into the VHCB program. So a little bit of a bridge.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
I just to editorialize, and I very briefly, I understand and your explanation makes sense. I just think that it's just really sad that there's not a viable way forward for an extremely historically successful program. And kind of the short-sightedness, I think this is a good example of the short-sightedness generally of the federal action and what the impact is going to be on communities, not just in Vermont, but elsewhere. And it's just discouraging.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think, the interest level that we were seeing, folks wanting to serve in some of the initiatives that AmeriCorps had been rolling out, just showed that people want to serve. They want to serve their communities. They want to serve on the current and, top line issues. And there are certainly fewer opportunities to do that now than there were, at least in Vermont. Other questions or comments? So with that, that's our plan. You're looking at our plan on your screen. The process is paused. We will see a NOFO. An RFP will come out quickly thereafter. And then we will do the best we possibly can with the timeline we're given. I will say our business office, including all the folks in the business office, general counsel, or central office too, general counsel, agency leadership, they're all aware of the position we're in right now, as well as how these NOFO processes are working and with other sources of federal funding. And so when we do see a NOFO, all those folks will be looped in as well to make sure that however we move forward is structured in a way that makes sense on the state side as well. So that's the plan, which unfortunately doesn't let us move forward today, but I think should allow us to be in the competition when it happens, whenever that is. There it is. Okay. Planning and visioning for the future. Visioning is funny concept these days. I wanted to highlight committee work. So we've been talking about this for a while, and I would really like to kick this off in the new year, especially with our enhanced staff capacity. 2025 feels like it just flew by, and I have thought in my head many times, man, I had hoped we'd make more progress on some of these things, and then I realized that the progress was largely the progress we did make was largely making sure that the programs we still have. So a heads up that I'm going to be recruiting for these things. We do need more commissioners generally, but we also need to get some of these committees up and running. I'm looking to build out an executive committee consisting of a chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary. I'm hoping that we'll develop either a monthly or bi-monthly schedule of meeting with just that committee in between the quarterly regular commission meetings. A nominating committee, which is ad hoc, but we do need it right now. A finance committee. That's, I think many of you have heard this, but historically, that was a very active committee when SerVermont was a standalone entity, and we did all of our own finances. Now that we have the business office, that committee doesn't do that, but I think it would make sense to have a committee that's making recommendations to the full board in terms of how we do spend our money. I think quarterly meetings would perhaps make sense for that, but that committee can decide that. A program committee, which really is focused on administering the competition and working with McKenna to make programming recommendations to the full board. Communications committee, working with Jay to, I'm going to say communicate. We haven't had a communications committee in a while, but we are supposed to have one. And then we could potentially have a public policy committee tracking national service legislation, which, not to get on a totally other topic, but I did neglect to mention this because at this point it's just another. Uh-oh. You all there? Are you all still there?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
That's scary.
Our thing just turned off. I touched it with my foot. Apologies. But and I should have had a slide for this, but there's actually bipartisan legislation being worked on right now to reauthorize AmeriCorps at the federal level. So Senators Cassidy of Louisiana and Coons of Delaware are working on the, I'm going to say it wrong, I always do, Promoting Service Through AmeriCorps, PSA Act, which would not only reauthorize AmeriCorps, which we're currently out of authorization right now, but it would address a few different pieces of AmeriCorps and making them a little more user-friendly. For example, there's some education award reform potentially. Details all TBD, but that there has been legislation introduced previously, and they're working on that. And so, a public policy committee at a time when we're trying to work through AmeriCorps reauthorization could be a useful ad hoc committee. But mostly, the executive, nominating, finance program, and communications committees are the ones we're interested in. So we will be sending out a survey about participation in those committees. Those committee meetings will also be public meetings, but virtual attendance will be fine. And then because they're all being newly revamped or newly created, those committees will be in charge of their own work and direction. They will all have staff support, important to note. But I think that will help us move work forward in between regular commission meetings. Any questions or thoughts about that?
I'll just speak to, I believe Patrick, Gina, and myself were on the nominating committee when we talked about this earlier in the year and had sort of paused, given the state of things. But I think it was like right around the time that the executive order came through was right when we were meeting. And I think maybe there was another person or two on that committee as well. But I think in terms of that, around guidance of like communicating, how we communicate to folks who are nominating for committee to join SerVermont in a time where things are a little bit uncertain, and just having a good message around that, I think, will be helpful. But I'm certainly happy to continue on that committee work if that's where we're headed.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Yeah, that would be good to brush that work off, because yes, you had just started doing some fabulous stuff. Yes, right exactly then, Patrick.
Yeah, I was just gonna say same thing. Happy to continue to work with that nominating committee. And I think at some point in the past, I think I've served as a secretary, which largely involved taking notes. If that's of help, just holler at me and I can do that.
Okay. And I will be reaching out directly to most of you, if not all, probably all of you. I think having one-on-one conversations ahead of the new year as we're trying to reorganize and get, start fresh. I know that the start of a new year could be kind of a symbolic refresh, and I think we need one. So I'll be reaching out to set up times to talk to each of you, and we'll be looking to talk about which committees you think you would like to serve on and what potential roles and all that fun stuff. Thank you, Patrick. All right. Anything else on this? This cursor thing. All right. So meeting schedule. I think in 2024, we actually did an okay job trying to set up 2025 meetings. And then I think everything went sideways and we lost that a little bit, which is fine. It is what it is. But this is our typical meeting schedule. We usually meet in, actually, sometimes it's February, but we have it scheduled already for January 15th. And then historically, I'll even expand it. We've had meetings in March, April, May, and June, depending on what's happening with the competition, what we need to do with formula funding. But usually 2 of those are what we schedule. I'm thinking that since we don't have a NOFA, but we can kind of guess, usually it's June when we need to submit our formula package. So we'll probably try to pre-schedule it June. And then I might actually say, I don't know, I'll talk to the staff here, but May might be useful because I think everything will be a little delayed. But usually we have 2 meetings in that window. So sometimes they're close together. We then either meet in September or October, usually October, and that's when we talk about where things stand with the competition. So usually the NOFO's been out for a bit. We've had letters of intent. We discuss what that might look like. And then we have this December meeting where historically we're deciding what gets sent to the competition. So I would like to get all of those for 2025 on the calendar. So we'll be sending out some doodle polls to get our 4 regularly scheduled meetings. And then I would anticipate that in March, April, May, and or June, we may need a special meeting in addition, which is fine. We can do that. And then at least tentatively, right now, I think bi-monthly committee meetings, so 6 times per year. Most committees would meet to do work in between, with the idea being that all of those committees will do their work, they won't be able to take action, or they can take action but can't make any kind of decisions that require a board vote, and then could bring anything substantial to the full board and report up to the board, so that when we have our quarterly meetings, everybody's getting up to speed on what all the committees are doing. And we're also not having to meet for hours and hours while we just get updates. So that's the thinking right now of how we would like things to go. Again, probably early in the new year at this point, I will send out doodle polls to get these things on the books other than the January pre-scheduled meeting. Any questions about that? All right, we're making speedy progress when we don't have to talk about the competition. In terms of upcoming events, January 15th is our next commission meeting. Potentially a lot could happen between now and then, so that's a good time to have a meeting. That is the week before the MLK weekend, which we have heard nothing from AmeriCorps in terms of MLK Day, but we do know that there are service projects happening around that time, particularly Vermont Housing Conservation Board when they have their member orientation. So we will be engaged in those. And if there's any other opportunities to serve, we'll pass those along. And that is the only specific upcoming event we have on the calendar. For the time being. And with that, that gets us to the end of our agenda, unless anybody has anything else. Hearing nothing, Megan, you want to close us out?
Yes, and do we have a motion to adjourn, or I suppose enter executive session if that's a goal as well?
It isn't a goal, but if folks wanted to talk in more detail, it would have to happen in that scenario.
Yep.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Any second? Thank you. Any discussion? All right. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
We are adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank you all. We will see you next month.
Thanks so much, Phil. Happy
Yeah.
holidays, everybody.
Yes, happy holidays.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Happy safe holiday.
Thank
Bye.
you.